Hey folks, I'm Chuck Black and we're talking about how not to become a good programmer. And today's topic is debug randomly. What I mean by that is when you encounter a defect or a problem of some type and you just randomly try changing things in your code in the hopes that things will get better. That's not the smart way to do it. A better way to do it is to debug intelligently. I will give you different approaches for doing that at the end of this lesson, so stay tuned and pay attention. Okay, so what do I mean when I say you shouldn't just randomly use a scattergun approach to figure out what a problem is? In this situation, I'm looking at my host monitor where I have written code that does a bunch of stuff, and I'm going to run it and see what happens. Python 3 host monitor, and I'm going to run it. And I see this, and if I use a scattergun approach, I'll go, oh my gosh, operation not permitted. I wonder what the problem is. I think I'll go in here and start tearing out code and retrying different pieces of code in any of these different areas in order to figure out what the problem is. That would be a stupid way to do it. The smart way to do it would be to just look at this stack trace and to look at this line here, which is the last line of my code, and it's telling me that scappy.arping is actually causing the problem, operation not permitted. Maybe the problem is that I am not doing sudo. So now I say, okay, sudo, I'm going to run this. Let's see if this works. The good news is that my arping is working, but wait a minute, look at this. All of my different things are getting exceptions. Why am I getting exceptions? I don't know. So then I would come back here and say, oh, maybe I need to come in and change how I'm pinging the host. Maybe I need to change my loop here. Maybe I need to do my argument parsing differently, etc. And in reality, the problem, if I was to look at what actually was going on and look at my error message, I would have been able to figure out that my problem is anytime I try to go get at the server, and guess what? My server isn't running. So I should be running my server. And now I come in and say, whew, my server is running good. Everything's going to work perfect now. So I come in and I run it again, and it's running pretty much okay. It's doing the discovery, does the discovery, and then, oh no, I've got this problem, failed to retrieve host from server, not found. I could come back and just randomly try different things again. But as you can see, I've actually done a search, failed to retrieve host from server. So this tells me exactly what my problem is. My problem, as it turns out, if I was to investigate this a little bit further, is that I have the wrong URL. I did host singular instead of hosts. And if I were to do this again, then my monitoring would work. The point is this. You can see that it's beginning to work as it ought to. The point is this. Look at the error messages. Examine the error, whether it's in the form of a stack trace or in the form of stuff that I've printed out, like I helpfully did here, and I did in other situations as well, to figure out exactly where your error is. Don't just randomly try different things. Now, the second thing that I'm going to do is teach you how to intelligently develop code and debug code. That will be next. So what advice can I give you when you're developing code to do it in such a manner that it makes it easier to debug? Well, I have a few suggestions here. The first one is this: develop your code incrementally. What I mean by that is this: if I was writing this host monitor, I would have a general idea of what I wanted to do. But one of the things that I want to do is discovery. So I would probably start with discovery and just write this little piece of code here and make sure that this is working like I wanted it to. Then I would add in code that did something like this, and testing the get host by adder. And then I would add this code right here. Now update host, that requires a little bit more extra stuff. So perhaps I would then add stuff that does my HTTP request. So now I'm adding in a little bit of this code. So I still don't have the actual monitoring code. What I might do then, because I know for monitoring I need to go get my hosts from the database via this REST API, and then I need to do my ping host and the thread pool executor, etc. The idea is that you write it a little bit at a time and then you test it. That way, if you do have a problem, say when you added this thread pool executor, what do you think is going to be the problem? Well, it's probably the last thing that you did. So developing code incrementally allows you to isolate the problem. Now, if you've already written a bunch of code, you have no idea where the problem is, then you need to do things like have print statements or maybe use the debugger in order to isolate the problem. Don't just randomly try new stuff, but try to figure out exactly what is going on. You saw me look at the print statements, the output, and figure things out. Now, if you get in a situation where you just can't figure out what exactly is going wrong, then what you need to do is this last one right here. You need to go back to a working state. So take your code that's broken and begin to unwind the changes that you've made. So take away the most recent thing that you've done and see if it works. And if that still doesn't work, take away what you did before that and see if it works. And continue to do that till you get to a working state. And then incrementally add stuff back. So if you can get things to a working state somehow, then you can begin to add things one at a time and see what causes it to break. So if you follow this advice, your debugging of code that you've written will be much simpler and straightforward. And besides, you'll learn what's going on. You won't just write code and then cross your fingers and hope that it works. And if it does, you really haven't learned anything or not very much anyway. So follow these pieces of advice and you'll be happy that you did. Well, I hope that made sense and you now know how to debug intelligently. Some advice that I give is develop code incrementally, isolate the problem, and if all else fails, go back to a working state and proceed from there. Hopefully that will help you to become a better programmer. Thanks for listening.